Hello friends and welcome to Resilience and Innovation Thriving in the Evolving Games Industry. My name is Jason Imms. I'm the Head of QA for Keyword Studios Australia. And today I'm very thrilled to be the chair for this session. And I'm very excited to introduce my group of friends here. So we'll start with Adam Lankman award-winning Clara Reeves, CEO of Hipster. Round of applause. We've got everybody's dad, the CEO of the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, Ron Curry. We've got the who we've got. We've got you're all in different order for me. That's not helpful. All the way from the US, we've got your friend and mine, Ted Nola, CEO and founder of Stella Games. We've got superconnector extraordinaire, founder and director of Superglue, Kirsty Parkin. And finally, the consultant that consultants turn to for advice, John Cartwright. I'm really happy to be here today to talk about this subject because it's a challenging one. It's a difficult one. Things have been hard. I think people have seen the news. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there around the games industry and the challenges that we've been facing, studio closures, lots of layoffs. But we're also here to kind of talk about how people are surviving, because that isn't really in the news very much. Like what work is being done to keep studios afloat, keep staff above water and keep people happy, and for how emerging people are dealing with this current situation. So we're going to be talking about some of those challenges, but we're also going to be talking about resilience and fortitude and passion, as well as those kind of more difficult issues and just the overwhelming nature of living under capitalism. So on that really kind of delightful note, I'd love to kick things off by addressing that elephant in the room. It's been a hard time. It's been difficult. It feels like maybe the trend is improving in 2025. The numbers don't seem quite as dire as they did in the end of January 2024. Where are we at? What are the trends looking like? Does anyone feel, my natural inclination is to go to you, Ron, but is there anyone kind of ready with some stats or anything they're keen for?
First, then I'll go to you.
Okay. Wow. So I guess an observation, we had a conversation last night and I kind of came up with a bit of a metaphor is we've spoken for a long time, how great the industry was in Australia, and then we talk about the GFC and how it decimated and we crashed and burnt. And are we back there again? Are we seeing this thing? But I think, I was reflecting last night that we're on a much more solid base now. It's kind of that metaphor of, we used to have built the house on the sand and now we've built it on rock. So things are tough, but we actually have a much stronger foundation in Australia now. We're not relying on a few companies. We're relying on many, many companies. We've got a great ecosystem. We've got some incredibly talented, successful, independent companies. We've got some great mid-sized companies. We've got the likes of, Keywords, for example, who are here, or Hipster, who are doing great stuff. We've got, Playside. So I guess the ecosystem is a lot more balanced than it ever used to be. And I think that's a good start. We've got balance, we've got stability, and that helps ride out a storm.
Multiple income streams, right?
Yeah, multiple income streams.
One thing won't knock us down.
Yeah, and I think that's where we were, and I guess I'm clearly old enough to have been around when we got knocked down the first time. And you're right, there was one model, yes, and it was not it wasn't the model that was going to make us successful long term. Yeah, sure.
I'd love to ride along on that, which is, hi, I'm from America, land of intensity, and we're currently in intensity globally. So I think that's what people are seeing and getting confused by is, like, if you are in the exact right position right now, there are fabulous prizes to be won, but if you're trying to find a position, it is very difficult. But this talk is resilience and innovation, right? And that's how you do it. Resilience is just another way of saying being adaptable, observing what's happening and being flexible to change. And innovation, well, in a world where, like, if you're not already one of the top contenders in a certain category, don't compete in that. Do something different, build your own market. And one of the things I observed, the GFC hit everywhere, right? It gave me my start as an independent back in the States, but it was very short-lived. And so this is going to sound a little risque, like how dare this make sense. The GFC was one of the best, worst things that ever happened to you because it allowed you to build something different than what we have in the rest of the world. And so even though you're feeling the pain right now, like everybody else is, I think Australia is a little better set up to weather this storm than places like the US or Europe that have been more formalized, more traditional. And you will notice that the studios that have been affected most heavily by the current headwinds are those that are more engaged with that formal industry.
Yeah. I think the difference as well, the GFC absolutely hit us. Yeah. What it did do is it really launched the indie scene in Australia. And the fact now, there's obviously the horrors persist and there's sadly all sorts of layoffs. But we are in a much better position because we have a much broader indie industry than we ever had before. And I think because of it, what I see when I go out to talk to publishers is there's a lot of interest in working with Australia, which there wasn't outside of the big studios before. Like when we all lost our jobs during the GFC, it was awful, absolutely terrible. It's not fantastic, but it's getting better. And I think there's an opportunity. And Australia has such a great reputation for making indie games. And that's what's going to see us through.
Cool, yeah, thanks. And it also, I guess, depends what you're looking to do. So I think some of you in this room won't necessarily be looking to make your own game. You might be looking for work in the games industry, and that obviously affects you too in the same way. But in terms of that broad base, because of the convergence that's happening through things like Unreal Engine into other related industries doing similar things, if you want to keep your skills growing and relevant and current, thinking broadly outside the sort of, I want to get, a job in a video games company and I want that job now, thinking more broadly about how you might find work in a related industry or how you might do something that's slightly different to what you thought you might do, but keeps you involved and keeps you current. That's a great, because we actually don't even know technically what any of this is going to look like in 3 or 4 years. We just don't know. So get out there, keep using your skills, do something that if someone offers you something that isn't perfect or isn't exactly in the kinds of company that you wanted, just say yes, take it, dive in. You don't know where it's going to lead.
I have just some small follow-ons to both John and Christy, which is, so one, like you do have one of the most well-established large-scale independent games practices in the world. And so one problem, if you are looking to get into a studio or you're joining a studio, you're trying to figure out like why are we having such a hard time outside of Australia, is the rest of the industry, especially in times of like economic recession and depression, they go for a safe strategy, which is do what you know as well as possible large. And there are a lot of us in the States and in Europe who are pushing for what we know is true, which is no, you need to go to the novel. So if you have problems seeing that future, know that people know that it's there. We just have to convince people. And it's just marketing. It's just sales. And then some of you here may not want to do games for work at all. You may want to make games for the sake of making games. That is lovely. Just make sure you know that if you are making games for the sake of the games, as my friend Brendan Keogh said, making money from that should only ever be aspirational, okay? If you want to make games as a business, talk to some of the people up here, talk to the people who've been doing it, because there's a different set of skills you need on top of your creative mind.
Really phenomenal point. And by the way, as a chair, I love the fact that I didn't have to interject at all. I'm hopeful I can just sit here the entire time and you all can just have a talk about it. For the younger people in the audience who maybe went around 12 years ago when the GFC knocked us completely flat and destroyed everything, the simple context there is the global financial crisis happened, the dollar changed value, and we lost about $14 million worth of federal funding.
We were all doing work for hire. So we were all working for companies overseas, and we were now expensive and far away, so easy to cut.
Yeah. Whereas the difference now is we have an indie scene that is not only present but thriving in a lot of cases, and the international investment that is happening, I represent keywords, is more stable now thanks to things like the DGTO, the Digital Games Tax Offset, which makes it easier for them to survive these kinds of downturns. Is that going to remain true? Are things like the amount of state and federal government support that we have today that we did not have previously something that's going to keep things safer?
If we keep working on it.
What does that look like?
Because it's relentless. You have to. I don't think it's something that's set and forget. It's like, we've done great work. Keep going.
Yeah, don't take it for granted, folks.
Yeah, and we have to keep using
and make
it. We
the
have to
most
keep,
of it. We have to do a good job with what we've been given. Yeah.
Is there more than just keeping your applications up? Like, should we be writing letters to our ministers?
We should be really making sure that if we have good outcomes, that those are shared and understood. We need to advocate. We need to show people the things that are obvious to us, but are not necessarily obvious outside of our industry. Communicate that clearly. It's everything that this man sitting next to me does. Please keep going.
I think what we need to do, and particularly around the DGTO, is because we've got to convince government, both sides of governments, that it's really valuable, is the thing that ironically we're not overly good with is telling our own stories. We're very good storytellers. We're not very good at telling our own stories. So I know we're kicking off, over the next couple of weeks, talking to people who are using the DGTO and getting their stories. And those stories go beyond, we made a game. It's what does that mean? What does it mean for employment? What does it mean for creativity? What does it mean for international investment? There's a whole bunch of stories we need to be telling better. And we've got some great stories to tell.
Do we have any success stories about how studios have struggled and survived through this period, the work that they've done to protect their people that we feel safe sharing in this space?
No. I feel very safe in this space, but we're just still working on them. And we got to work with those companies to figure out what are they willing to say and what do they not want us to say. So
I think that maybe rather than something that was on the brink and pulled back, for us, I think it's changed our decision making, and we've invested more so that we're hiring more and taking a few more risks and looking at a few more things. So it's a growth incentive. Yeah. I
have two small anecdotes, and I won't say the names of the people or the states that they were in, but I did have a meeting at Megwa 2 years ago with someone that is pretty accomplished. I've known him for about 15 years, runs a studio out there. And he called like 10 minutes before and said, "Oh, I can't make it. I have to go to government." I'm like, that is far more important. In the States, the only time they call us in for government is to blame us for gun deaths. He was going to argue for fairness with another state, like parity. And then another story of someone that was in a state that did not support developers. And I met with them. They came out to Los Angeles and we were talking like, why are you there? Like, do you have friends there? Do you have family there? I said, well, no, we just kind of love the city. And I'm like, they have said over and over again through their actions that they do not support your work. So why are you there? Why aren't you in one of the states that does? And 3 months later, they moved. So all of you who are new here, just all you can do right now is join studios that understand that. And if you see a referendum come up or a vote or something that they're going to try and cancel something you need, just make your voice heard.
And in order to do that, I think a lot of people think, I need to make my voice heard. I've got to go straight to the SAFC. Actually, you can go to your local member of parliament. So when you vote in a local member of parliament. And I would never have thought to do this myself, but I'm actually on a councillor on my local council, and people come up and talk to me about things all the time, like complain about potholes and things that they would like fixed. And I think, oh right, that's my job. I actually have to deal with it. So this is what your local elected member of state. So your local state member, you can talk to your local federal member as well, because there's 3 levels of government in Australia. But you can talk to them. And actually, if you write to them, you probably didn't know this, but I used to work in government, so I do know it. They are required to respond to you. They must respond. So write to your local member of parliament if you think that we need something for games in South Australia that we don't have, and your local member of parliament will get back to you.
Yeah, and then if enough, it's a really powerful.
Yeah, it
thing.
really is. But make sure you think it through first. don't just
you tell this to me, an American. Just great relationship with our government, let me tell you.
But think about what you're writing first and make sure that it's achievable and reasonable. But yeah, it's a powerful tool that I think potentially not enough people know about and use.
And the upside, I guess, for the industry in this country, and like I said, in America, you get called into government with gun deaths.
And our funding is they take your wallet.
Yeah. Whereas here, I think we can safely say in every single state and also the Commonwealth, we can walk into a minister's office and happily talk about games. We had a minister here opening Sage this morning. She's incredibly engaged with the industry. We have had Ben on the panel beforehand from City of Adelaide. So I think all levels of government now are engaged with games.
I would like to plus one that with, it was about 2 years ago when I was at the Minister's Dinner in Vic for Megwa that I realized it was kind of a synthesis of why I felt so different coming down here. And what I realized was in most of the world, they're happy to bring us in because we know that our industry makes a lot of money, provides a lot of jobs. They're happy for that, but they don't respect us. They don't see us as a legitimate industry. And I'm not saying that everybody in Australia does, but there are large sectors of the government, there are large corporations that get funding that very clearly, not just with their words, but through their actions, legitimize us and respect the work we do.
And I think that's changed a lot in the past few years as well. Various states are doing more and more. I'm not sure if there are any states that don't do anything. It's varied, obviously, but then of course we also now, Screen Australia came back to the fold after a decade away in terms of funding. That is so valuable. That's fantastic. So all of those things that have come in are helping us on top of the fact that now you can exist as an indie. You can self-publish. 10, 12 years ago when the GFC happened, it really wasn't an option, but there's like the barriers to entry now are so low that you can. And like so many of the games out here in the hall are going to self-publish, and like that's amazing. Like you couldn't do it. It's phenomenal. It's a new world.
So we've been talking a lot about this kind of studio level situation. Let's talk about individuals now. How has the employment landscape changed especially over this last kind of 3-year period where things have been challenging? I mean, it's always kind of difficult to find a job in games that's being advertised if you're looking at Seek and things like that. But given we're a small sector, it's relationships often that create opportunities. I'd like to just kind of touch base on how that stuff looks these days.
I'm just going to break the elephant in the room. Between the years of 2022 and 2023, 24, over 30,000 jobs lost in our field. Yep. And those are not jobs where people have been seeking replacements.
I think in Australia, our percentage of that is not proportionate. I think that it's not as bad here as it is overseas. That's somewhat anecdotal, but I think that's right. It's really tough right now. And you can see it. We're recruiting right now. It's very, Yep.
Yeah, and given that's my job, I can reflect back that. So there were, when I went to the Unreal Fest last year on the Gold Coast, and the mantra was survive to 25. Like, if we can get through this year, we'll be okay. Get through anything. Exactly. It was a tough year. And it wasn't just a tough year for games. I also recruit for visual effects. It was a tough year for visual effects. They were affected by the tail end of the actors and writers strikes, which had a much longer tail. So, when you stop making something, the visual effects usually happens a long time later. And so that part of the industry was affected as well. But this year is looking much more promising across the board, I think. There's been things like Ubisoft, but there are also studios that are doing incredible things. And I really don't think that we have seen yet the full effects of the DGTO. I think if the effects are anything like the visual effects tax offset, the PDV, when that came in, what it ended up doing was attracting really big studios to Australia, like, Industrial Light and Magic and Weta. So those studios are here because of the tax offsets. And if the DGTO works in the way in which it's intended, we should end up with really big games companies coming here too. That's what we would hope would happen. So the combination of tax offsets and the value of our dollar against the greenback, if that stays attractive, and the fact that we've got great education and we've got a really good creative base, I think actually stands us in really good stead for the future, even though it feels hard now. Because I'm old, I know that things go up and down. Right? So when something goes down, when an industry goes down, it will come back up again. It's actually
happens. The best time to look for the next opportunity.
It really is.
This is like when we're talking about the GFC being, in some ways maybe a positive. The iPhone came out, and in Australia, everyone went, if I don't want to move overseas, I could put Unity plus an iPhone together, and we are very established as a leader in that space because of what happened there.
I do also want to give some really solid praise to the design of, kind of in contrast, both within the state level and then the DGTO, which is tax law, which is incredible. but the grants versus the rebates. You may not know this, young students, young hobbyists, young creators, but one of those things is designed to help you, and the other one is designed to bring in people. And the two are very well separated for the most part, such that what happened in 2008, it'll be hard to happen again because you will have IP, you will have ownership, which you did not have before.
Yeah, I think something else that's going on, and it's not my place to name names, but because there have been a bunch of successful developers in Australia, there have been some very, very big hit games coming out of indie studios. A lot of those studios are now giving a leg up to the next generation. So they're not talking about it publicly, and I'm not going to dox them, but there are a bunch of studios, there are a bunch of titles I know where successful developers have made loans or grants to other developers to give them the leg up, so that we're building the industry. It's not about one person hoarding all the money like a dragon, hopefully, and it's about, you know what, if you've had some success, kind of pay it forward and help some other people and give them a leg up. And that's what's, you know, so encouraging about the future, when we've got people who are in a position to do that and they are thinking about the industry and not just thinking about themselves.
Having a really healthy ecosystem around you is what you want as a business. I want amazingly talented people. I want other companies that we can learn from that are local. Like the better that we are together, the easier it makes.
We're not in
the work that I
competition.
do.
We are not, you know, we could all be making individual games in Australia and we are not in competition, as long as we realise that, and then we can all succeed and all like race together kind of thing.
This is all very anti-American, and there's a reason that
is that
there's a
bleeding
reason
through?
that I'm here.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's sure.
No, it's true. It's the philosophy of it can sometimes be hard to explain this to government, but it's not either or, it's both. We need big companies, we need little companies, we need everybody. The big companies often train people who go off and start their own companies, you know, and they build the ecosystem. So, you know, I'm always suspicious of sort of anti-corporateness. It's like, oh my God, that's so evil. It's not necessarily, and it doesn't necessarily exist at the expense of the indie. We need both desperately. We can't really have one without the other. So I think, you know, I try and always sit in the middle of all of that. Do we need a big games company to come to Australia? Yes. Do we need support for indies to develop their own IP? Absolutely. We need both of those things.
I think you and I hit on something. We all met up, some of us last night, and we hit on this one thing, which is the goal is to make sure that people that do not care about things don't own things that need to be cared about. And as long as you do that, then great. Like if big companies come in and don't care, great, that feeds the industry. As long as that people that care about things and things that need to be cared about are able to work on those things, great.
Yeah, it's it's something Jason and I were talking about at lunch yesterday, is when you've got screen agencies that have people who've worked in games working on their games program, the difference is enormous. Yeah. It's just a huge difference, because then they care about that and they also know how to help better. And that's something that has taken a while to happen around Australia, and I kind of understand it, because the screen agencies have traditionally been film and TV, and that's great. And I know nothing about that, so whatever. But it's like getting those games experts in, those people who've actually been through the mill, who've shipped games, who've done all that. That's what makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and not only people who've kind of made games in the past and then moved into that space, just a willingness to engage and to take part and to show up at events, and show up at small events, show up at not just for the big ones when the minister and the camera is going to be there, like just to really commit to the community. It's been wonderful. I think something I've been personally really excited about as a key difference to our current situation to where we were 15 years ago is 15 years ago we lost all our veterans. Like you could count on one hand the number of veterans who stayed in Australia. They either left the industry or they left the country. And I feel like we're not having that problem this time around. We have seasoned veterans here in Australia who are working at studios, who are running studios and are hiring and training and mentoring the next generation of game makers. They're not having to make it up from scratch this time around. How hopeful should we be about that situation?
I think we can be hopeful about it. I mean, I think it can always be better. I think, certainly with the GFC, there are a lot of folks who disappeared off to America or Canada or, Europe for better jobs or bigger studio jobs, that kind of thing. And a lot of them have come back now and they're bringing that experience with them. But I think we have to, like as an industry, we have to engage with them, that they want to stay here, and to sort of get them into that mindset of like, you can help other people. It's not just about, you know, building your own career. I mean, like, that's important for anybody, but being able to, you know, like getting people to come to an event like this and give advice, and getting people to, you know, to work with developers and mentor developers, getting, you know, we need to leverage that knowledge, and let those people know that they're valued and they've got a lot of value to give, I think.
When I first started coming down to McW, I know I heard people saying, I call it Mingwa, whatever. Anyways, and I went to the show floor. First, I was amazed by the number of indie games. It was like, it's a smaller PAX than PAX West, but a larger indie floor than I ever seen. And every game that I saw just had a much higher level of baseline competency. I remember there's one game I saw, I forget the exact game, but I played it. It was beautiful, lots of smart decisions on like the things that you don't think are going to be important, but are actually pretty easy to do if you do them, and add a lot of like luxness to it. We're done. And so I asked them like, hey, tell me about your game. Like, well, this is our first game. And I'm like, all right, who did you talk to? And this happened over and over again. There were names like yours, like Liam's came up, like Trent's came up, people that have worked in that single player space as well as QA, et cetera. And I was like, okay, that's the difference. The fact that people are sticking around and mentoring is giving you, like in the States, what I generally see when I see indies that are making their first or second game is really good bones. They have really good design understanding, but they don't have the experience yet. And because some of you are staying around, you're able to share that experience and help them avoid kind of dead ends and landmines. So I would be hopeful. I think the trend has been that folks are generally sticking around because you have successfully built a very unique and ultimately, maybe not at the individual level it feels all the time, but at a scale, you're a very resilient field as a whole. And that's good. I would not bank on it, keep making sure it's incentivized, but I would put some hope on that.
I think this is another reason why you need that full ecosystem, because in order for someone who's, you know, maybe at the stage of life where they're having a family and they're buying a house and they sort of want to put some commitments down, they need a certain level of security. So they need options. If I lose this job, is there another job? And that is what we didn't have at the end of GFC. Even if you got a job, you were pretty worried. Whereas we want to keep it where there are many options for wherever and whatever you want to create. If you're at the really art, you know, end of game making, if you're big studio, if you're technology, if you're wherever you want to sit in that very broad sphere of the things we make, are there multiple options for you so that you have some security, you know, if this one you have right now falls over.
Another thing that's probably worth remarking upon, I think, is that even when things are good, this is an industry full of people who are passionate and want to get into it. So it's a highly competitive industry to break into, even when things are good. So if you're looking to break in when things are harder, it will be exponentially harder. So you are still going to have to put all of those good things into practice, make sure that you do your networking, make sure if you're still at uni, often for the first job, studios will actually go and talk to the lecturers and say, who are your best students? So make sure that make sure you impress your teachers. That's something that's worth doing. What you can also do is have a look and see which roles and skill sets are in demand further up the food chain. So there's often a lot of graduates, but then once you sort of get to mid-level and senior and sort of those skill sets really start to sort of coalesce, there's often a shortage. I know that feels odd,
Can I just
but
give
there
two little bits of very just practical advice on this, because we're hiring right now, so I can just show you what we're seeing.
Totally.
Look at the studio you're applying for. Look at what you make. Is there a match? Even if you're like, I don't have something specifically a match, but I reckon I could do it, show us, because we need to see, even if it's a sketch, going, look, I get your style and I get that it's different from my personal style, but look, I showed you I can get that. Look at what the actual job is. What can you do to demonstrate that you can do that you get it. If you're applying for a role like with us, where it's like we make really bright square things, like a really detailed folio of elf drawings is not gonna, go, yeah, that's the best fit for us. So if you really do feel passionate about working with us, just show us that you've had a think about us and what we make.
Finish things.
That was the other one.
The other one is like,
finish projects.
do your project, do your game jam, finish your game jam, finish your game. Maybe your game isn't fantastic.
Yeah.
That's okay. But if you go through the whole process and you finish it, you're going to learn so much than if you abandon 10 projects and ship nothing.
Also, write me like just a few notes on what you learnt. Finish the project, post it and go, it's not great, but I learnt this and this and this, and that's what I'll take on to my next one. Or what I did like about this project when I met, like, you're not expected to be an expert yet. Your
overnight success is going to take 6 or 7 projects, right?
Yes.
And leave it in your portfolio, because we need to see the incremental. Don't just put the best one. Show that you've gone from here to here. That you've learned. With each iteration, you've learned something.
And do write a personalised note to the studio of like, even just mentioning like, I know what your games are. I have looked at them. Maybe some thoughts if you have some thoughts, but just something that says I actually have deliberately applied for your studio, not just blasted my CV everywhere. Yep.
Now I do have, it's not a counterpoint, it's a little bit of a twist on it, which is don't make yourself into something you are not just for a studio. And the way to do this is it's called be T-shaped, right? Like not T-pose, but T-shaped. So find the thing that you like a lot and get very good at it. But then also make sure you're constantly looking at the things to the left and right, both within your discipline and even outside of it, even outside of games, because you might find something else that you love and you drill into that. And what will happen is, listen, you need to specialize for your first job. I hate to say it, but you need to be specialized or you're not going to get a job unless you want to just do your craft, and that is fine. But as you get more experience, what happens after you pass that 5, 10, 15-year mark is suddenly the role you have, you might have a title. You're going to have a title, but like your role is incredibly unique because you are kind of a radiograph of skills and you have orthogonal skills to that are just yours. And congratulations, that is how you build the thing you want to do. That's how you build your most fulfilling work. So please do not look at a studio and be like, I hate programming, but I'm going to become a programmer to work for that studio. Don't, because they will be able to tell.
I'm certainly not saying change yourself into things you hate. But, if you're looking at a studio and applying for it and you hate everything they do, just stop right there.
Unless you're just, there are people like this and God bless them, they make the world go around. If you're like, yeah, I can do that from 9 to 5 every day without hating myself. Okay, cool. Do that and then work on your actual craft. But be aware, it is hard.
It's
and
hard.
Also, you need to be aware that before someone looks at your folio, probably the first thing they'll see is your resume. So tell them who you are. That's a really important one. And also have a look at the job description and see who they're looking for. So if they are looking for a 3D photorealistic modeler, you could say, hello, my name's Kirsty, 3D photorealistic modeler. So tell them that you are what they are looking for, because recruiters are time poor. We're going to have like 150 applicants and we're not going to have really realistically time to have a look through them all. We will give them a 3-second glance. If we have a look and go, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm looking for, perfect. So the best way to do that is see what they're advertising, what is the job role, and your resume it isn't set and forget. It is a response to a brief, right? The job description is a brief. Your resume is a response to that. So read the job description and make sure don't lie, obviously, because you can't, and you can still apply if you don't have all the experience. But what you need to do is reflect as much of that job description back in your resume as you possibly can. And if you can't do all of it, that's
okay.
okay.
You can work to a brief.
Absolutely.
Which is so much of what making games is understanding a problem and addressing it very head on. So if you can show us that you have that skill, that you're like, I understand what you're after and I'm giving you the exact information you asked for, amazing. That's a great skill.
Yeah, one thing that I often tell when I have students coming to me for outreach and mentorship is like, you have to reframe what you think a resume is for, what a job interview is for, et cetera. It's not like a resume should not just be a list of things you have done. It is everything on that is an argument towards, like you were trying to say, hey, the goal is not just to be like, yeah, I can do this job. The goal is to be like, if you didn't bring me in, like it would be a bad choice, right? Because I am perfectly fit to it and here is why. And same thing with an interview, when you get your foot in the door, The goal with that is not to sit there and answer every question point by point. It is to let them understand. Like when I'm interviewing people, I want to understand how they think, how they're going to work with my team. Like if they can just give me the book knowledge quoted, but I don't understand their processes. If I ask them about a thing they liked and they can't explain the lessons they learned, as Clara said earlier, like it's very difficult. You don't have a lot of information to make a choice. So when you're doing your resumes, first off, talking about yourself is hard. So bring friends in, bring mentors in, bring in people like these folks to weigh in because they're probably going to be able to frame it better than you were because talking about ourselves is terrifying. That's it.
And it's counterintuitive, but there's value in addressing your known gaps and being willing to put that in your application. Say, I don't know these things that you've pointed out, but show that you're hungry to learn it and you're really keen to learn it from them, the way that studio does it, as showed by these examples that you've shipped in the past. Like, but own your gaps and put them forward.
So this is a fun one. If someone asked you at an interview a question that you don't know, there are 3 ways you can respond. One of them is the wrong way, which is to lie, because they will know. They are interviewing you. The second one is the safe route, and it's kind of boring, which is to just say, I don't know. The third one, the clever move, is to say, I don't know, and then say what you do know, and then say, let's learn about it together. Not in those exact words, but that shows that you are a person that is resilient. You're adaptable. You want to learn and grow, and that's what we want to hire.
Curious. We're often looking for curious. Like if you encounter a problem, because in game development, you're often working on things that you don't know will work, you don't know how to make it, you have to work it out. What do you do when you hit a roadblock? Are you curious enough to get around the roadblock? And do you sort of pull at the edges of things so you can solve problems? And that's, those are the things that we're looking for in interviews. I would follow up on that and say, if you feel like you have to lie to get a job, you don't want that job. Yeah.
And that employer doesn't want you.
Yeah.
Unless you're in America.
All right, we're nearly out of time, so I'll finish on maybe a controversial question. We'll see how you feel. It is in keeping with the current conversation. There's a common attitude that I've seen over the years of young people who are studying in games and are hungry to get into games when they graduate, that they will feel like they have failed if they're unable to find a games job directly out of school. And I want to encourage them to consider adjacent industries, gain experience and return with that experience. But we're not here to encourage you to not kind of join the games industry, but like there's value, right? In my opinion, in seeing other sectors. Other sectors are often more mature than games.
Massively.
Yeah.
I'd say the experience that our team has that comes from outside of games that they bring in to games is so valuable to us. Like people who've worked at architecture firms or they've worked at, medical data processing or something. It's just like they've had the opportunity to look at things from a different lens and they bring that into us and it's massively useful.
Absolutely. I mean, I spent a couple of years working outside the games industry, bizarrely running R&D for energy storage. And I learned so much. I thought we were awful at managing projects and games. Oh my God, we're amazing. We are absolutely amazing. Because, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, sorry, $2 million over budget and 6 months late is okay. What? No, it's not. So absolute eye-opener. People sort of sometimes think the games industry is not a proper job or whatever. Thanks, Mum. And it's like it more than is, and we are so good at many, many things, but having that perspective from outside is really, really useful. So like if folks are working in other industries, but it's somehow related, whether you're using your technical skills, your artistic skills, those are all applicable to games. And to be honest, if you're doing them outside, you're bringing in that experience and it's really, really useful. It's not a downside. People sometimes go, oh, but I don't have experience in games, I could never get in. And it's like, oh, you totally could.
And your career is a marathon, not a sprint. It really is. Like you're going to be working for a long time. So look at everybody up here. I'm on about I'm on about my third career.
I'm 35.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's so much. Your life is so long, and this is a really rapidly changing industry. The technology is changing. It's changing faster and faster and faster all the time. So we don't even know if the skills that you have now are going to be useful. They may not, but they may be. Your creativity will always be useful. Your ability to solve a problem will always be useful. Your ability to collaborate with a team will always be useful. So you can take those skills and use them anywhere. and you might find something that you love. So take that risk, and like, as before, say yes. If someone offers you a job, designing windmills for VR training on agricultural farms or something, try it, take it, yeah. Or even if it's not the making that you want to do, maybe it's HR, maybe it's I don't know, accounting for games. I don't know, but if it's around what you love, you will find that you learn something, and you might end up somewhere that you really enjoy. You might find your path.
And also what you think you want to do and what you end up enjoying doing are not going to be the same thing at all. I started out as a programmer a million years ago, and I'm glad I don't anymore, and that's cool. And I've done all sorts of things along the way because this industry has changed so much in the last 35 years. So your dream job today is not going to be where you end up. And even if you do get to your dream job, it probably isn't what you think because it's just all changing. And that's okay.
I'm literally doing a panel at GDC, a talk at GDC called Personal North Star because it moves around. I have a homework assignment for all of you, by the way, that ties into Jason's original question. It's a book by an Australian. It's very dry. You don't have to read all of it. Brendan Keogh wrote The Video Game Industry Does Not Exist. It's cheeky. But here's the thing. If you are a musician and you went to music conservatory, you went there because you were already making music. You wanted to learn how to do music better, and you had no preconception this was going to get you a job as a musician. Same thing if you go to art school. You were making art, got better at making art, and then no preconception. You're going to make jobs, or you might use your art for marketing or for UI UX or something else like that. What we've done is a major disservice to a lot of students, and it's changed a lot. Like you fortunately are now in a new generation of games education, especially here in Australia. But games are a practice, right? Not a process. They can be a process, but schools for a very long time said, come here, you like games, come learn how to make them, and then you'll get a job as a game developer. That is a lie. It is an absolute lie because that is dependent on the capacity of the market. Whereas if you treat games as a craft, then it doesn't matter if you get a job in the industry. You've improved your craft, and those skills are applicable almost anywhere.
Beautiful. I might just add to that too, QA, it kind of compared to the project management anecdote, QA is a really specialised sector that in games is incredibly immature. And so someone going and learning how to do QA in a more mature sector and then bringing that back. I've hired multiple people who have zero games experience but a lot of QA experience.
I love non-games QA experience.
Yeah. It could be quite dramatic. So you haven't failed if you make that.
Isn't
choice.
QA how you start your career in the games industry?
I will kill you. All right, we have 2 minutes left, so we might call it there.
We'll finish it. Sorry.
I had to end on that.
You start your QA career, which is a very great thing.
Exactly. Please join me in thanking our panelists today. And thank you to you all for joining us.
Ron had a point on the last one, I thought.
I think I lost it.
Oh, you got 2 minutes, go. Dive in.
No, I was just talking about, transferable skills that, when you'd go out. But also, we know businesses work better when you have a diverse workforce. And if you...
Not in America.
Well, there's no DEI in America, but outside America, when you can bring people in your organisation who have been taught to think and look at things differently, that's how we improve our processes and our games and our businesses.
It gives you, if you think of Eye of Sauron, you just get much bigger scope when you add new people with new perspectives who've seen more than you've seen, and you add them to your team, and it's just whoa, fog of war is gone, I can now see all of that. And every time you add someone with a different perspective who has seen different stuff from you, you can see so much more. It's very powerful. Yeah.
That's a much better note than taking the piss out of me. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming along.